Hi, welcome to Eyeglass DFS mode failover demo. I'm going to walk through all the pieces of a DFS failover solution and show you how simple it is to failover with Eyeglass, SyncIQ, and DFS. So if we get started, let's take a quick look here at our environment. So here we've got your typical SMB clients here, the orange, Active Directory, green cluster, our production cluster, our target cluster, which is the purple, Eyeglass, and SyncIQ. Just scroll down a little bit more, you can see, without going through all these little bubbles, there's lots of things to do, lots of steps, and I'll show how basically all of these go away with a single push of a button. Eyeglass will take care of all of this for you. So let's get started. So let's just take a look at our clusters. So here's our production cluster, SMB1. We're going to make this a DFS target. Go over to cluster 2. We see SMB share over here as well. This won't work with DFS because in SyncIQ, which we'll take a look at now, one side is read-write and one side is read-only. And DFS solutions, of course, assume that all copies of the data or targets are read-write. So here we see my mirror policy is active, so I've failed over at some point, but I'm active over here on my production cluster. Let's take a look over here. My policy, it's disabled, so that's what I expect to see. Let's see if we have any quotas in that path. IFS data policy 1. There's none here because I don't want them applied when I have SyncIQ running. So let's look on the production side. And there we have IFS data policy 1. So I've got Eyeglass up and running over here. Just quickly, 2 clusters, production here, and failover over here. If we look at the jobs window, got a few things going on here, but let's just zero in on the ones that we want. By default, Eyeglass will synchronize shares between source and destination cluster. But in the case of the DFS solution, we actually only want the active share on the active data. So Eyeglass has to be put into DFS mode, which ensures that the shares only exist on the writable copy of the cluster. So let's take a look at that. So here we see our DFS policy. It's been synchronized, which means the shares on both sides. Let's put that into the DFS mode. Just telling us that it's going to delete the shares in the target. That's what we want. So we say OK. Puts it down here in this DFS mode container. Now we want to fail back at some point. So we're going to take the non-mirror policy, this one. We're also going to put it into DFS mode. And there we go. So it hasn't run this yet, which means we're going to go ahead and do that. So let's just start run now. So it's going to go ahead and run this job. In this case, what it's going to do is it's going to compare the source read-write copy share list. I only have one, but there could be more than one. And it's going to compare it to the target, and if it finds it on the target, it's going to delete it. So that's done. Quick refresh, and I'm in good shape. Green. Go over to our target cluster, and we can see SMB1 has been deleted. This is what we want right now because we only have one share, and it's active on the active cluster. So now let's go take a look at our DFS environment. This is our client, which we'll get to in a second. Let's go take a look at Active Directory. And we'll just walk through the configuration that we need there. So we'll open up DFS management. So here we have a DFS namespace. This is domain-based, called corp data. It's AD1 domain.test. idr.test/fo demo. We've got corp, and inside corp we have two targets. We have dr.ad1.test smb1, that's our share, and you'll notice we have another one enabled, prod.ad1.test smb1. Both shares are in the referral list, but only one share is active. So all the clients that mount this DFS point will be handed both targets. This is what we want, but we only want SMB1 active on one cluster at a time. This way, all the clients have a copy of both the source and the destination for failover. And we also don't need to worry about enabling or disabling or doing any of those types of things. We can set this up once, which we've done, and send down both paths. Now let's go take a look at our client. So here we've mounted the directory, ad1.test fo demo. We're in the corp data folder, and I've installed the DFS utilities. So let's take a look at what it's telling us here. If I hit enter here, it's going to tell me, let me just clear the screen here so it's easier to see. That one more time. So it's currently resolving to prod.ad1.test smb1. So let's go see where that is. That's our target cluster. Over to this tab, network, go to my subnet, pool 0, and there it is, prod.ad1.test, and then we've got dr on the other cluster. So let's go back to Eyeglass. And go to our running jobs. So that's been synchronized. We've got the mirror policy active right now. That's okay. Let's go to our Idr Dashboard. A couple different things we can show here, but I'm going to zero in on DFS mode. So only DFS mode enabled policies will show up here. One's disabled, that's normal, and one is okay. And this should be our mirror policy, and it is. So how do we fail this over? So we're up and running. DFS is configured. SyncIQ is up and running. Let's go to our DR assistant. We got a choice of per policy, but we also have DFS enabled configurations. So it's on my source cluster. Continue on air in case something happens that we want to continue through the failover exercise. Controlled because in this case the cluster source is online. And if there's any open files, we don't want to stop. We want to keep going. So let's say next. Gives me my list. I could have more than one here. We can fail over more than one DFS policy at a time in one job, but I'm going to select the only one I have, and it's green, so it's okay to continue. Validation is done on a few different things. Looks like it's okay to keep going. I make sure I've read that I know what I'm doing, of course, so let's submit that job to the queue. And make a bit of space here. Just increase this a little bit longer. So at this point, I can navigate away from this browser tab, shut it down. The failover is still going to occur. This, of course, is just so I can watch the failover process and its progress. So all the various steps are going to show up down here. So what's left to do once this completes? With DFS mode, there's nothing left to do. So as this is running, I'll just sort of walk through some other areas. So here we can see a history of all the failover that have occurred, successful and failures. DFS mode failovers, so I know the difference. Here's some runbook robot failovers that are occurring. So let's maybe look at some of the DFS logs. This, of course, tells you all the steps that were successfully completed. Gives you a bit of a view of each step. In case one fails, then you at least have an idea of where you need to begin steps to recover from. This can be downloaded, of course, and used for support reasons. So let's close this and check in on our job. Now, in a controlled failover, we do assume that you want any last minute changes. So that's an important step. You may have a policy that's actively running, or you may want to force it to run so that any changes just before you cut over have been replicated over. That's typically going to be the longest part of the failover process. The change rate of your data dictates how long this is going to take. Okay, so I let this job complete. Let's just expand out some of the steps it went through. So it's gone ahead and failed over the policy. It's made it writable. It runs resync prep on the source. It runs the policy on the target, so we get replicating back in the other direction. So that's completed successfully. We move the schedule over. Just expand this out again. So we completed all these steps successfully. And most importantly, we've gone ahead and cleaned up the share on the source, and it's been moved over to the target. So let's go look at our cluster and see what's happened. Here we are on the target, and there's SMB1, did not exist before. Looking at our source, it's gone from here as well. Let's go check on our quotas. Did our quotas fail over? The policy 1 quota is not there. Let's go to our file system over here. There's our quota. So we've now moved our shares and our quotas over. So what's happened to our DFS client? So let's run this diag command, resolves to DR. So we can see that the client automatically detected that the share disappeared from prod, it moved over to DR, and there was no changes required on the client. So let's just go and refresh our view. Test folder, and there we go. Let's write something a little bit bigger, make sure I can write. There we go. So we can see that the client wasn't impacted other than during the failover process. You are going to lose access to the cluster for a period of time. During that replication stage is the longest part of the outage. But once the share has been created, your clients will automatically switch over. Each application that's using the cluster is going to behave differently. We can see over here I had some traffic running. Iometer doesn't like this very well, so we're just going to. So here we're looking at Active Directory. No changes here. Nothing needs to be done. As we can see, our client is able to mount and browse and use the data. We're now looking at the target cluster, and we can tell because DFS has now picked up the change from prod. Now we're over on DR. All this was automatic. The Kerberos ticket that was used to authenticate is still intact. The client cached both paths, and Eyeglass completed this. So if we go back to our DR assistant, our failover history, we can see here we now have a log that this has just happened. And that's it. So you can see how many steps have just been eliminated from an SMB failover exercise from one cluster to another. And I should point out, you can mix and match non-DFS mode and DFS mode can operate at the same time. We can also run Runbook Robot, which is another video how-to, which we'll go through in another video. Thanks for watching.